Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast from Orlando. I have Danny Snow, and he's a customer experience keynote speaker, and he's going to teach the audience what he's learned from Disney, leveraging insights into delivering ultimate value to listeners interested in becoming more proficient in customer experience, either as business owners, entrepreneurs, managers, or employees. Danny, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. Yeah, I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I really am interested and fascinated in talking to you because this customer experience and I was reading a book about touch points, but briefly talk about your journey and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Sure. So I grew up here in Orlando, and so one of the few people you're likely to meet that was actually born here. But both my parents spent 20 years working out at Walt Disney World, so I got to grow up in the parks. I was out there anytime there was days off from school, or my parents just needed something to do with us for the day, and so I just grew up with that kind of environment. And so my dad ended up in 1999. Then he was working with the Disney Institute, but he left Disney to start his own consulting company where we focused in on the whole customer experience. And so I was a freshman in high school at that point, but really always paid attention to that customer experience aspect whenever we were out anywhere. And it's something that kind of stuck with me just from that Disney day because I always assumed that's just what theme parks were supposed to be, what Disney World was. And as I got older and started visiting other theme parks around the
Yeah.
country, quickly realized what a big difference there is between Disney World and everybody else. And so I eventually, after I graduated college, I joined into the family business, was doing sales and marketing, and then eventually started getting out on the road to go and deliver keynote presentations, working to really help organizations around the world find those ways that they can differentiate their business. Because I don't care what it is, if it's thrill rides, hamburgers, banking, financial services, there are 100 other companies right around you that all do pretty much the same exact thing.
Hmm.
How can we stand out? And so that's really what our company does, and what I spend my time doing now is helping companies find those ways to really stand out in a very competitive marketplace.
Fascinating. And so there's so many questions I have for you. And the first question I have for you is again, I was alluding to this book called Touchpoints, talking about the customer experience and journey. How does Disney use these various touch points to enhance the customer experience and make Disney uniquely Disney?
I think one of the key things they do is they see every single step, every single touch point through the lens of the guest, through the lens of the person that they're serving in that moment.
Hmm.
So, based on whatever processes it might be, one that we use in our consulting is getting the guests from the hotel or from the parks back to the hotel at the end of the evening. The fireworks have gone off. Now it's just you watch these poor folks as they're dragging out of the park in these moments because this was a long day out of Disney, right? You spent an ungodly amount of money, you're exhausted, but this has still got to be Disney. So they looked at, okay, they're going to ride the bus. They're going to walk into the hotel. They're going to walk through the lobby. They're going to walk down the hallway down to their room. They're going to now open the door back into their room. Here are a lot of different areas that we can enhance the experience and make people remember that they're still at Disney. The bus drivers, they'll sit there, they'll get kids singing along to the different Disney songs, or they'll do Disney trivia contests. And the thing we like to highlight here is that the bus drivers, they were already driving the buses. Okay, so there was no added cost to Disney, there was no added time. But it was taking a step back and looking at something that they'd already been doing out there since 1971 and seeing those moments through their lens. And one of the best ways it was a housekeeper, and her name was Helen. One
Uh-huh.
day she was doing the evening turn down service. And you know how the guests, the kids will have the stuffed Disney characters like the Mickeys and Plutos. And she put them up on the kids' beds and she tucked them in. And she just left a little note saying, I know you had a busy day. The characters told me they were tired. So I tucked them in for you. And
Yeah.
so now you got this family that's walking back, that's exhausted, that's fighting with each other, that's pissed off. They spent all this money just to come out here and fight in another state. And they walk back in, and this is what they see, and it becomes Disney again. And it's those moments across all these different touch points that I think Disney really does it better than everybody else. And it's those easy, very inexpensive, and oftentimes just free principles that we teach as well. As those are the things that really help you stand out in customers' minds when they think about where are we going to go back to now that we've already been here once before.
Uh-huh. Interesting. The next question I have for you is because Disney is really a storybook organization to learn from,
Yeah.
either positive and negative. So you talked about the positive aspects. Talk about the negative aspects, because when I was growing up, everybody was like a family rite of passage. If you didn't take your kids to Disney World, you were considered like it was odd.
Right. Yeah.
And
Something was wrong.
and all I remember is it was fun, but I remember you stand in line for 3 hours for a 5-minute ride, and then I'm like, and then it's, like, hot as hell. It's so what has Disney done to, deliver a world-class customer experience?
Yeah. It is miserable in the summers here. If you've been here in Orlando in the middle of summertime, I don't why they built the park here. It's always a mystery because it's miserable. But they find all these different ways, like standing in line for 3 hours. So they started to make the lines part of the experience themselves. Not just standing in line, going back and forth. If you've been on the new Guardians of the Galaxy ride or Avatar or anything, you really go through a whole process. Now, if you haven't seen the movies, it doesn't make as much sense, but it at least gives you a real sense of what the ride is going to be about.
Yeah,
And now you get there and you waited 2, 3 hours sometimes, but it doesn't feel like it. Yes, you were
yeah,
waiting in line, but you had things going on along the way, or they've got the Disney app where you have Disney games that you can play through there, or yeah, you'll see people doing the heads up game. I know that's not Disney's, but people find ways to keep themselves occupied in the line. But I think Disney really started the wave where they made the lines part of the experience.
mm,
And like to your point, getting the kids out there, that is such a huge thing, and something that they're working on right now because it is so expensive. Like they're
yeah,
currently offering a deal. I think it was 50% off of kids' tickets for the summer from 2 to 8 years old
yeah,
because they know they got to get those kids in now. So 20 years when they have kids, they're going to bring them back again. And then when they're grandparents, they come back. And so it's this whole cycle where if you start missing out on this wave, because there are so many choices that are out there,
yeah,
now you find 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're in a world of hurt. And then you got different culture wars that ended up going on too that I know did impact a lot of the business there. I think that's all a learning curve. You find out what works and stick with it. And you should bet on Disney. I think if anybody's going to figure it out and do it the right way, I think they're the one that's going to do it.
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because taking my family, we go in the off season where it's and then we strategize. We're like the first we'll go there early when it's like the temperatures aren't too hot and then we get lunch and then eat in line and just you have to strategize, obviously,
Absolutely.
on just like all the crowds. The another question I have for you is because Disney is a legacy company and we've seen like legacy industries and companies just get their asses handed to them if you look at a lot of products and a lot of
Oh,
services. So what is Disney doing? Obviously, Disney is like the behemoth in for like entertainment and a brand, but what are they doing to stay on top of it? Because there could be another thing that comes in. People don't want it. Maybe it's virtual reality or AI
yeah.
or what are they doing to stay ahead?
There is a ton of that, and right now we got opening up in a couple months the Universal Studios Epic Universe that's going to be here. So that's going to be a huge draw, and I think Universal has really helped Disney find ways that they got to keep innovating because for a while it was all about the nostalgia and the old rides and everything, but that wasn't really attracting a lot of the younger guests anymore. So now you're getting more of the cool experience through rides like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is by far the best attraction out of Disney. It's an amazing ride, but I think it's forced them to step their game up in a lot of ways and how they're getting ready to approach some of the new projects that they're going to be doing as a
Yeah,
way to keep competing and stand out because these rides, they just keep getting better and better.
yeah,
And but then they cost $500 million. So now you got to keep rising ticket prices. And I know it's a vicious cycle right there. And so I think what they're finding out is they had to raise the prices because those rides were so expensive. But now we're dropping off because it's hot, it's miserable out there. But again, they're looking at how can we entice these kids to get back in here because they've got that incredibly long-term thinking to make sure they don't go the way of some of these other companies that
yeah,
rest on their laurels for too long and then it's too late.
yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, the other thing I want like, cause like, I think more recently, I think it was like, kind of post-pandemic, they started to really introduce, like, a lot of Harry Potter and then these new things, but, like, when I went to revisit, like, Universal and Disney, like, in 2011 or 12, it was exactly the same as
Yeah.
when I went when I was, like, 11 or 12, and I'm like, "This is not," but obviously they've come changed with the times.
Yeah.
Yeah. With branding, Disney has built a really awesome brand, and How does now these days companies can't compete on price and product alone, and now brand and culture, we saw that with Zappos, are now prized possessions. So talk about how people can't, or how companies can't compete on price and product alone anymore.
Yeah, every study that's out there over the last couple of years really highlights that it's the experience that's going to set you apart because there's always what other products are. There's always be somebody that sells one cheaper. There's going to be somebody that's closer to you. But we've got our favorite restaurants. I've got my dentist that I've been going to for 20 plus years, and none of them are very close, but you'll bypass a lot of other options because you always know the experience that you're going to get there. And people have proven themselves. Like one of our favorite restaurants, it's called Bonsai Sushi. But I remember the very first time I went with my dad and got something that was fantastic. But we went about a month later, couldn't remember what I had. But so we ended up having the same waitress, and I said, "We were here a while ago. I had something that was fantastic." She says, "Oh, you had the dragon roll, and I remember you really liked it." And it's my dad. You had the California or lunch. I forget exactly what he had, but this was only meeting us one time and remembered that. And we would go back time and time again because the sushi was great, but we've got a lot of sushi restaurants that are right around us that are all fantastic. But whenever it was time to go and we know that something needed to be done to Bonsai Sushi. And it was because of the people there. It was clearly trained, but clearly just know how to work with people and how to interact. And that's where I think most companies fall short is they don't train for that. They train and hire to fill a role. They maybe just need a body to fill the role there, but here's what you need to do the job. Now go do it. But
Yeah.
when you don't have that human connection, and now a lot of your guests I know focusing on AI and building a lot of that, and that's becoming more and more of our lives. And it'll get better, I know, but I'm always one where I hate taking out the human element there because I think that's where we really have the chance to separate ourselves. And I think the companies that truly focus in on that, train for it, and constantly reinforce it are the ones that are going to stick around and be here for the long term. And even when we have the ups and downs in the economies, those are the ones that tend to stick around.
Yeah. You talked about now it's all about experience and memories. And how can a company, just people listening to this podcast, founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and how can they build a company that consistently wows the people they serve through experiences?
So look at it. So Gallup has this customer expectations hierarchy that they found through their studies where they went through, doesn't matter what industry you're in, but at the bottom, fundamentally, we as customers, we expect accuracy. You've got to be accurate in your descriptions. The food has to be correct. You know what? If those basic things aren't met, then it doesn't matter how good you are at anything else. Nothing else matters. So you've got to get that right.
Yeah.
Next part up then was availability, was being when I need you, how accessible are you? How easy is it? Are you responding to my emails and my calls in a timely manner? Or am I being greeted right when I walk on property there with a friendly smile? Just something to let you know, I see, I know you're there. Maybe I'm busy helping another customer, but at least I see that you're there.
Yeah.
Building on that from there, then you go into a sense of partnership where as me as the customer, do I feel that you've actually cared about me? You've actually cared about the experience that I've had here, or do I feel that I'm just another transaction? If you're the nurse and you're doing a blood draw, I'm just your 10 a.m. blood draw, but now you got a 10:30, you got an 11. No real care there. And so there's all these little ways, but then the final piece of it at the top of the pyramid there, which is what they say is advice. When you can teach your customer something they didn't know before, when they become better off because of the interaction that they just had. That's where you really start to lock in the loyalty. And so when you start to put these four pieces together, that accuracy, availability, partnership, and advice, that's where you really start to wow your customers at every step. And it won't be appropriate probably in every step to teach somebody something new. Yeah, it'd be great if you could, but that's not realistic. But if you're always finding that way to at least create a sense of partnership with your customers, you're going to win a lot more of them than you won't. And so that's where we teach those moments of wow is how to do that. And we use that pyramid from Gallup, which I think is a fantastic resource.
I think the next $1 billion idea is somebody listening to this podcast is how someone can transform the healthcare experience into a Disney experience. So that would be, I think that's
Yeah,
the
there are a
problem.
lot of great. Another great guest for you. I've been introducing to this one is Jake Poor, ex Disney guy as well. But he really, that's his focus is on the hospitals there and trying to get what if Disney ran your hospital? And he's phenomenal. And they need a lot of work too. But I have noticed too over the years, the incredible strides that a lot of these hospitals have made. Like 7 years ago, my father had a heart attack while he was working out, and he
Mhm.
survived, but he needed to have quintuple bypass surgery.
Yeah.
And so this hospital had an app. So while he was in the surgery, it was constantly updating us the entire time. So we were not out in the waiting room for 5 hours with no clue what's going on. And I know that was one of those things where they saw through the lens of their patient, this is a moment that we can deliver something here for somebody. I've had nurses, I was going to visit a sick grandma, and a couple of nurses were on the elevator with me, and they said, sounds like somebody died in here. It was one of those where I was fortunate I didn't know what that smell was, but it's something where that shouldn't be said in front of a patient. Whether so there are a lot of those little moments where I think there is work to be done. But from what I have seen in my limited experience, fortunately, in the hospitals, is that I've seen a lot of great progress. But Jake Poor, if you are looking for another guest, I think he would be a great one for you.
Yeah. Another question is organization runs on its employees, and as a consumer and a entrepreneur and a customer, I'm always looking at, is this, I can walk into a storefront or a restaurant, or and I'll immediately, like, this will be out of business in 1 or 2 years, 5 years, based on the employees. So what can people learn from Disney to get their employees more engagement? Because a lot of places you go and they're like, the employees are disengaged, they don't care.
Yeah.
They How do you improve that?
Right, it starts with the hiring process. You put in the job descriptions of what's expected. You're hiring for this, but you're training for it. But then you've got the managers and leadership that are out there that are reinforcing this on a daily basis. And when you see this happen, because it happens everywhere, we see that all the time. And then a lot of times you see it's the manager, they're doing the same exact thing. These managers will say one thing, but then you follow their behaviors and you know something's missing there. So it comes with it, like at Disney. You're training, you go through the Disney Traditions program for a little while, then you train on your specific attraction or store, wherever it is. You got a couple of days doing that, but there's constant training that's going on. And if they see you falling short, there's
Yeah.
coaching. There's areas for them to try to improve the experience there because they know it only takes a couple of those before people start looking elsewhere. And every store you go into nowadays, yeah, there's people that are looking at their phones or they're just talking amongst themselves
Yeah.
rather than worrying about serving you. So, you might be forced to go in there because it's just the closest and you just need something right away. But if you had your choice, you're probably not going to go back there again.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the post office or any government, like DPS, or but um
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, just like that. So yeah, if we could get in with them, that would be great. I think we could do a lot of help there. Yeah.
yeah. How can people learn more from you, and if they want to have you speak at their organization around these principles, and learn from you and connect with you?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. So our website's www.snowassociates.com. And I'm Danny Snows. You can find me on LinkedIn or YouTube there at Snow Dentist. That's our business account, but there's a lot of information that we put out there as well. A couple of different areas to find some information there. But yeah, if I could ever be a service to your audience, I would love that opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation
I really do.
around the Storybook brand, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me and enjoy the rest of the day.